Now, so the stereotypes wound all of us. They wound women, they wound men, and they also make for pretty terrible relationships. But they are different. For women, the emphasis is always, first and foremost, on how we look, no matter what else we do. He said the first thing he noticed was your great personality. He lied. So the message that girls get early on is that it's never going to be your great personality that's going to be most important. And a body type that statistically 5% of American women have is the only one we ever see as desirable or acceptable. This is genetic. You can't diet yourself into this body type, not for long anyway, any more than you can make yourself taller. The models are very tall, genetically thin, although they often starve themselves anyway, broad-shouldered, narrow-hipped, long-legged, and usually small-breasted. So when the models have large breasts, almost always they've had implants. This is a body type that basically doesn't exist, but again, it's the only one we ever see. So no wonder there's such terrible stress on women and girls. The Body Shop made this point wonderfully with their recent ad. There are 3 billion women who don't look like supermodels and only 8 who do. And that's just about the truth. Basically, we're told that women are acceptable only if we're young, thin, white, beautiful, carefully groomed and polished, and any deviation from that ideal is met with a lot of contempt and hostility. You never thought you'd lose your looks either. And look at the kind of real contempt that there is for this woman who's portrayed as completely valueless now. These days, the greatest contempt is for women who are considered in the least bit overweight, as in this classic, "I'd probably never be married now if I hadn't lost 49 pounds, which one woman told me was the best advertisement for fat she'd ever seen. The primary message that young women and girls get in our culture today is the message in this ad. At the top it says, "The more you subtract, the more you add." What a horrible message. The more you subtract, the more you add. Now, this is a fashion ad. They're talking about simplicity in fashion, but she's also very thin. They're obviously talking about girls staying very thin. And in general, as girls reach adolescence, they get the message that they should not be too powerful, should not take up too much more space. Soon you'll both be taking up less space. Not to be too full of themselves, not to throw their weight around, not to be too powerful. So no wonder, given this, at least 1 in 5 young women in America today has an eating disorder, the most common of which are anorexia and bulimia. And if you think of an eating disorder as any kind of disordered attitude towards eating and one's appetite, it's probably closer to 4 out of 5. Now, where else could this image of thinness come from, if not, at least in part, from the media images that surround us and that tell us in order to be acceptable, we need to be painfully, unnaturally thin? And some of the ads that we see these days are more outrageous than ever before. Put some weight on. And this is an ad for the watch, which the woman is wearing on her upper arm. She is so thin that she's wearing the watch on her upper arm, and they're actually joking about that in this ad. Put some weight on. The obsession with thinness, I think, is really about cutting girls down to size, silencing them. So not only do we have images of very thin girls and women, we also have many, many images of girls in ads with their hands over their mouths, or worse, with her lips sewn together, or silenced in many other ways. Sometimes it's a visual image. Here the woman's head is in a bubble. Sometimes there's copy. Say what? But her mouth is covered. Score high with nonverbal skills. And women of color in particular are supposed to shut up and to be barely there, just smiling the bothers away. Let your fingers do the talking. It's endless, message after message.
Soft colors. Let your eyes be heard without making a sound.
And the body language of girls and young women is usually passive, vulnerable, get used, and very different from the body language of boys and men. So we have women typically posed like this, and men like this, a woman like this, a man like this. And this starts so early. Look at this double-page spread from Calvin Klein. The incredible difference. The girl, again, her hand over her mouth. All of the ads in the March 1999 issues of two progressive parenting magazines featured active boys and passive girls. All of them. An ad featuring a boy, an ad featuring a girl, a boy, active, exploring the world, a girl, trying on lipstick. This ad always makes me sad. I look at it and I see that the boy is already learning to look tough, to have that look of contempt. The girl has already got the smile down pat. Now, I have scores of these ads too, and they're always the same. The boy is taller, the boy is looking down at the girl is looking up, the girl is smiling. Always the same.
Good evening and welcome to Dead Air Live. My name is Rachel and I'm your host. And tonight the subject of our show is about media literacy, specifically about gender images in advertising. And I have as a guest tonight Jean Kilbourne, who's an internationally recognized media critic. She's done pioneering work on alcohol and tobacco advertising and images of women in advertising. She's a widely published writer and speaker who's twice been named Lecturer of the Year by the National Association of Campus Activities. She's best known for her award-winning documentaries Killing Us Softly, Slim Hopes, and Pack of Lies. Welcome to the show.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for coming. So the segment that we've just viewed is from your most recent video, Killing Us Softly 3. Maybe you could start off by talking a little bit about your background in this work.
I started collecting ads in the late 60s, and there were many different factors that led me to that. I was active in the women's movement. I became a teacher and found that it was helpful to use them in classes. But mostly I just was very interested in these images, and no one was looking at them in those days. No one felt that advertising was important. I also had done some modeling and was doing some at the time, actually, and that, although it was very there was a lot about it that I really disliked. It was one of the few ways that a woman could make decent money in those days. And there wasn't any kind of language like objectification or dehumanization to describe, what was negative about it. But I didn't do it for very long, but it did leave me with a lifelong interest in the whole idea of the power of the image and how powerful it is, but also how short-lived it is.
Could I ask how you started this particular type of work, deconstructing ads? Looking at images?
Well, the first ad that I saw that really struck me was an ad for birth control pills that was in a medical journal, and it showed the copy said, "Ovulin 21 works the way a woman thinks, by weekdays, not by cycle days." And it showed a woman's head, and in her head was 7 days of the week, 7 boxes, and Monday was a laundry basket, and Tuesday was an iron, and it was clear that it was very stereotyping, and that there was something really wrong with it. Again, I wasn't trained to look at these ads. I just was interested, and so I brought it home and I started collecting ads and looking at them and seeing what I could see.
That's interesting. And what did you have a motivation, a greater goal in collecting these ads?
Not originally, but eventually I had lots of them. I made slides from them. I began to use them in my classes, and then I was invited to speak to larger and larger groups because the word spread that this was an effective presentation. I had a great fear of public speaking in those days, so it took a while to get over that. But I didn't set out to make a career of this, but that is what has happened. So now, for many years, I've been traveling around the country and giving lectures and making films, and recently wrote my first book.
Oh, that's great. Well, you've been in this field for a long time. For how many years?
30.
Wow.
Very long time.
Well, I imagine, have you seen a lot of changes in the way images are presented in the media?
Well, one wishes that I'd seen more. A lot of the changes have not been positive. I started talking about the ideal image of beauty a long time ago, and if anything, that's become worse with the use of computers to make faces and bodies absolutely perfect. I'd say that there's more pressure on girls and young women today than ever before to achieve a certain kind of impossible standard. The obsession with thinness is worse now than it was when I started. There's the sexualization of children, particularly of little girls. is even more intense. The violence, use of violent imagery is worse. And also there's just more advertising than ever before. So way more even than there was, 20 years ago. So 20 years ago it was a $20 billion a year industry. Now it's a $200 billion a year industry.
Wow.
The average
That's
American
amazing.
today is exposed to over 3,000 ads every single day.
Wow.
So there's just a huge amount of it. And also the culture has become increasingly commercialized, so that advertising, the market, have taken over the world of publishing, the world of music, the world of film. It's all the world of politics. It's really increasingly becoming about marketing and about advertising.
If I could go back to one thing you said earlier about the advances in technology making this ideal image of beauty even harder to achieve. Could you talk a little bit more about how computers are making the
Well, it
ideal
used to be
woman?
that when you saw, a woman's face in a magazine or something like that, it has been airbrushed. They removed imperfections, from the photograph. These days, they can take a computer and they can reshape the face. They can change it dramatically. They can also create women from whole cloth. They can just make a virtual woman and use her instead of having to use a real woman. And as a result, the image has become more and more impossibly perfect. Cindy Crawford once said, "I wish I looked like Cindy Crawford," because she couldn't, nobody could, because by the time they get through with all of the changes that they're going to make in a photograph and we see it, it's no longer human.
That's really interesting. Well, we're going to look at maybe a couple of ads if we have time, and just start looking at how you approach the advertisement and the images within. So what I've done is pulled ads for the same product, but from men's and women's magazines.
And that's a great thing to do. You can see how different it is.
Really, it is. So this first product that I looked at were, well, maybe you can tell.
Well, glasses, yeah, glasses. And here he's looking very intellectual, serious. It's a full head shot, so it's clearly his head, his face, his individuality, his brain that's important. Whereas the woman, is dressed in a bathing suit, which has little to do with the product that's being sold. She's in a position, with her throat back and of sort of submissiveness and powerlessness. There's no particular reason why it doesn't look like she's put on her glasses in order to read or to understand anything. It's, just because they go with her bathing suit. It's a totally different approach.
Yeah, interestingly, this is one ad that I showed to a group of teenagers, which video we'll see in a minute. They were perplexed by this particular image of the woman. At first, of course, they couldn't tell what the product was that was being advertised. And they also were kind of confused about this prop, this glass of milk that she was holding.
That's interesting, isn't it?
But it's interesting how they use, as you said, images that really don't have much to do with the actual product advertised. So
I'd see some sexual connotations in that. The way she's holding it, where she's holding it, all of that is probably meant to sort of add a little subliminal sex appeal. And the way you can tell it's an ad for glasses is that no model would ever be wearing glasses if it weren't an ad for glasses.
Right, especially in this type of
never.
pose,
So therefore,
setting.
yeah. But these are good examples of how extraordinarily different it is when you're taking a man or a woman.
Absolutely, and I have plenty more examples that we
Good,
can
I
look
bet you do.
at.
They're easy to find, aren't they?
They really are. So if we are ready with the tape from the Somerville Community Youth Center, we'll roll that tape.
Which magazines do you read?
YS, Teen People, Teen Magazine, Teen Beat, Teen Beat, and YM, that's it. And YM, better YM. Yeah, Sport. You hold this one. Okay. It's like she's not really looking at her. He's looking at the watch. Because it's like all diamond. Yeah, it has all diamond and.
He doesn't like the girl, he likes to watch.
Yeah. You see his eyes?
This to us seemed the most revealing. We like this the most because it has teenagers in it, so they're trying to get a message out to teenagers. Maybe if you wear this, you'll be attractive to either males or females. It's a Ralph Lauren type brand, so that's really big.
How many advertisements do you think you see every day, see and hear every day?
A lot.
In a day.
A lot. 3,000? A day?
A day.
Like 150, I say.
Where else do you see advertisements besides the radio and television?
Billboard.
Cereal boxes.
Cereal boxes. Good one. Quick one.
Milk boxes.
Milk. She's on.
The internet.
Shoes. Boxes.
This one. Why she has the milk. Yeah. That just gets me off. She has a
we get
glass
it, like
of milk.
she looks sexy with the
And
glasses,
she has
but
glasses,
like
and she has
the
like
milk,
this
she doesn't need the
bikini or
milk.
something,
Yeah.
bathing suit, and the milk. Just
Yeah,
I don't
it
know.
doesn't fit in.
Jenna, you guys have ideas about that one?
The milk.
I'll go with them.
I just said
Maybe
she
it's
ate
about
cookies.
lotion.
Maybe it's healthy.
You like what?
I just said she ate cookies or something. I don't know.
What makes an advertisement stay in your memory? Like, is there anyone, like, what's the most vivid advertisement? Like, if I said name an advertisement right now,
One's a lot of color.
like what? You have one in mind?
Funny ones. Funny ones.
Yeah.
Songs.
Yeah. Captain Morgan. Like 7 Up. Oh my God. And the Pepsi got higher.
Yeah, that one.
Okay, so that's for the same line of clothing. Do you notice any similarities between the women's poses?
Oh, they show their chest.
Do not relax.
Almost.
They
They show their legs.
Or they're bent over.
They got like a
Maybe
different
they're
color
like an
background.
animal.
See, like this one, it's like all brown.
No, that's a good point.
Maybe doing like the animal pose or something.
So they, well, that's interesting. So they look more like animals than people?
Yes. Yeah.
Does that give you a good feeling about that clothing line?
Type of.
It shows too much. Yes. Shows too much. Shows around here. Like, shows like that. All women do that. That's not true. Yeah. Not all women like to do like that.
No, what is he supposed to do? No, what's he supposed to do? This one seems very goldish, how can I say?
It's like she's in like a pot of gold, which is like melted, and it makes her look like she's like really rich and everything. And like if you have this, you'll be rich, goldish, and everything.
Sort of saying like the golden touch.
Yeah.
Everything goes with the skin.
What brand names are you wearing, carrying, or using right now?
Tommy girl.
Nike. And
Is his sports one?
Nike. Air Forces.
Can I get that?
I got Reeboks
Nike.
on. Got my Reeboks. I wear A1s. I got my
There's
Tommy
Old
right
Navy
there.
and Gap.
I think that's
Gap. All
Navy.
Old Navy. Every single outfit of the day is Old Navy. That's it. Old Navy and Nike.
This one was the one that we picked that relate to us because we didn't understand the other ones, and there's like we thought there was no point to the other one because they made no sense, and this one doesn't either. But we didn't get it. We only got that one.
We like, those are clothes that we would rather wear than any of the other ones.
Yeah, because the other ones they're too revealing, and we're not old enough to wear Victoria's Secret.
No.
We don't know that.
So what did you think was the message in this one?
That no. That the guy likes the girl's bracelet.
What's the advertisement for?
I don't know. Clothes maybe? Clothes, her shirt.
Tommy Hilfiger.
For leather pants.
Maybe his shirt.
It's blue shirt.
Yeah, they're representing Tommy Hilfiger colors.
And right there, he looks like he's feeling the pants.
Yeah, he likes the leather.
Thing showing that's about a perfume, and it notice how it has the word hot on it. So maybe it's showing that she's hot, supposedly, and it's very revealing.
What do you guys all think about all those hands around the woman, though?
the guy.
Oh, you don't have like all the hands for the guys. All
She smells good on the job, yeah.
She smells so good that the guys want to touch her.
Yeah, she attracts the guys.
I think
Did you notice what?
she's hot.
Did you notice what the guys are holding in their hands? The kind of,
Different wear materials, pins, scissors.
Dress. Fixing up her
They're
dress.
fixing her dress.
yeah, what do they seem to be doing to her?
Making a dress for her. Well, actually, they're messing up her dress. The poor girl. And that
Yeah, does it look like they're creating or taking away?
taking away.
They're revealing more,
Revealing more. Oh, okay.
so maybe that's the
What other products do you have at home that maybe you're not wearing right now? Brand names at home.
Fubu, yep, I have Magic. What else?
Old Navy.
Oh, hell yeah.
Old Navy. I got Gap.
Yeah, Levi's.
What?
TJ Maxx.
Oh, TJ.
Oh, I got Express too.
Macy's.
Oh yeah, Express. It's a body of a mannequin. What's it called?
Oh, really?
Those.
A mannequin?
Yeah, mannequin.
mannequins.
Oh, okay. Why do you think it's
What's the
not
real
real?
Her skin's so
Because
cute.
it's really white and it doesn't look like a real woman's body.
Yeah.
And
Necklace covers the little cracks
Goodness.
of the head.
It doesn't look like
You
a
have to
real.
sacrifice a lot to get that skin in. Whoa.
and what kind of words come to mind when you look at that?
Sexy. Oh no.
Sexy?
What happened? Yes,
Well, she is naked.
Rich.
But that's the thing. She's naked,
I
but do you
won't
guys
say it.
think she's sexy?
Well, I kind
No,
of
she's not.
Who, the white
Really not.
one?
But she
It's
kind
okay
of,
if I
the way I look at it,
It's okay if I say it.
it looks like Michael Jackson
Playboy.
looking like a female.
Playboy.
This one too.
Sex.
Eddie, what did you say about?
To me, when I look at that, it looks like Michael Jackson, like dressed up like a woman.
You went a little too far with those chemical skin treatments.
I
Okay.
think she made the same mistake.
She probably bleached herself, dipped herself in bleach.
Okay, so you don't think she's sexy and you think she looks fake. What do you think is the message behind that ad?
Well, get that and you'll look really like white. Yeah. I don't know.
You look
White
very sexy and feel sexy.
And your body will be soft and soothing. I know, smooth, soothing.
Yeah, you feel good about your body.
And
She is showing off.
so maybe you'll feel like all confidence.
What do you think about her posture? I mean, she's not standing up straight, she's not
She looks like
sitting.
she's feeling herself.
I don't know if we can say that on public
Isn't
access.
she laying down or something?
No. It's like that.
She looks like
Yeah, it's like this. It's like this.
Like this.
But when you look at it in the magazine, it looks like she's upright, yeah.
In the magazine.
In the magazine, but like that. She's really laying down.
Yeah.
Does she look like a strong woman?
no.
She looks dangerous.
Very weak.
That's probably why they have the whiteness, because maybe it makes her look feminine, and maybe that's attractive. But I wouldn't want anybody else. That's pale. But that's just
Oh, imagine someone really, really that way.
Michael Jackson, man.
I know.
Her eyebrows are painted over. She looks like a doll.
No,
Porcelain
even
doll.
a doll.
Even a doll isn't that white.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
I've seen
dolls.
white
White is like
Yes, sir.
yeah.
Yes, sir.
It's just such a
My
fake
mom
color.
would be away. She
No,
knows
like
it's
not
red.
real.
But I
It's
think
like
that is a real person who's like
It's
into
all
some-
white.
Oh, they could have done
Some,
like
like-
Little Kim put wax on her, black wax.
Oh yeah, and her.
Oh, that's a good question. Do you think that they made her skin look like that with makeup?
Yeah.
Yeah, like
I
a
think
wash.
so. I think they,
Took a long time.
I don't know how you call it. It's a cover up or something like that. After they digitally remastered, they use computer technology and maybe they white it over.
Ah.
So
What was your name again?
John D'Amato.
John. Did you hear what John said?
Yeah.
Digitally, what did you say?
Mastering.
Yeah, it could be a completely computer-generated image.
What is sexy?
What? That's what they think sexy is.
This.
No, first is this Phoenix thing.
What's that one?
The one with the bra.
Well, actually, the way the magazine opens, because that's the front cover of the magazine. So when you open the magazine, you read.
What is sexy?
You read that, and you see the picture.
Oh, yeah.
That's what you see when you open the magazine.
Yeah.
The first thing you see.
Smart.
First of all, the first thing you read is a question, what is sexy? And then the first thing you see is that lady.
And they say
that
like
lady.
this is sexy.
Do you think that there's any other possible definition of sexy, or is that the only one?
That's what they think.
Sexy
There
is
is
like
a
just being
definition of sexy.
yourself.
Being yourself is not sexy.
It's saying it's saying noticing quotes it has very sexy.
Being
on it.
yourself is not sexy.
So
Be
that's-
yourself.
Be yourself and you think you're sexy.
Do you think that you have to look like that to be sexy?
No. No, really, because it can be the fattest woman in the world, but there is some way that that woman can be sexy.
All right. Do you think advertising influenced you into buying products?
Yeah.
Maybe some.
Some products.
Oh, I see.
I bought this product.
Unless-
it was on Neutrogena with that Jennifer Love
Love
Hewitt
Hewitt.
one with the.
Unless some of them are.
I got that one.
You think because of Jennifer Love Hewitt you bought it?
No, it just looked real. I don't know.
Unless some of them,
She wouldn't lie to you.
Unless some of them they look fake and stupid like Yara.
No, I know that she's lying and everything just to get money. I know that, but like, it looked real because they showed like examples of it and they showed pictures of it and that looked really real.
Do you ever see the one with the guy with the pimples and he has like no friends? Yeah. And then all of a sudden he gets like his acne cleared and all of a sudden he has all sorts of friends. That one's funny. What's the next question? If no, I think you said no, that advertising doesn't influence you. Did you say no?
Yeah, because
How do you manage to resist the advertising?
what do you mean? Like,
Why doesn't it influence you?
because if I see something I like or that something that interests me, it's not going to be because of the people doing it. It's just going to be the effect or if I like it.
Do you think that advertising has an effect on what you like?
Sometimes. It depends because would you count popularity for something? Like if everyone had, like last year or over the summer, students was a big thing. Would that be like advertising?
Yeah, well, yes, that's a sense of advertising.
So I guess if everyone has it, you gotta have it.
You gotta have it.
You gotta have it.
Hello and welcome back. Just as a follow-up question to that piece, I imagine that when you ask people, how are you influenced by advertising or by the media, a lot of people must say, oh, I'm not influenced at all. How do you respond to that?
First of all, about 100% of people say they're not influenced at all. In fact, these kids are a lot savvier than a lot of other people that I've seen. And we all believe we're not influenced. And so what I hear more than anything else is, I don't pay attention to ads, I just tune them out. They have no effect on me. I hear this most often from people wearing Abercrombie and Fitch t-shirts. And really it's true, the more logos on a person, the more likely they are to say they're not influenced. It's the people with the Marlboro pack that's sort of showing that say they're not influenced by advertising. So what I say is that we're not brainwashed, we're not robots. I'm not saying that at all. But I don't think you can grow up in this culture and not be influenced by advertising. We're exposed to over 3,000 ads every day. It's a $200 billion a year industry. They spend a fortune on psychological research in order to design ads that will influence us. But they're meant to influence us unconsciously. So as long as we believe we're not influenced, we're sitting ducks.
Right, and they get exactly what they need.
We say we're not influenced and they get exactly what they need, right.
I thought a good example of that type of subconscious influence was one of the ads that the kids looked at, this Victoria's Secret ad. Especially just, as I said in the video, it is the front cover of the magazine, and when you open it, you immediately see this question and see the image, like the answer to the question. What kind of subtle message, or probably not so subtle message, would you think women especially would gain from that?
Well, I think everybody does. For one thing, it's an incredibly cliched image of what's sexy. It's about as cliched as you possibly can get. And one of the things that I say often is that all this emphasis on sex and on this kind of definition of sexiness actually is profoundly unerotic, because what it really is saying is that you can be sexy only if you look like this and if you dress like this. So anyone who doesn't, which is to say 99.9% of all women, is therefore by definition not sexy. And what a horrible message that is, you know, that sex appeal belongs only to the young, the thin, the beautiful, the well-dressed, you know, that kind of thing. So that it excludes almost everyone. So men as well as women, I think, are made to feel less sexy by all of these images. And so therefore it's really a very unerotic thing to be surrounded by these images. It also, this just seems to me so completely false. I mean, what's really sexy, it seems to me, isn't particularly, you know, an outfit like this, but it's passion, it's vitality, it's what makes us what's most unique about us. It's competence. I mean, it's all kinds of things, but it's, you know, it really isn't our underwear. Or if it is, there's somebody's got a problem.
That's a great point. I asked the kids what they found most memorable about ads, and I would ask you the same question as an analyst when you're looking at these. What sticks in your mind when you look at an ad?
Well, it would be different for me. I mean, because I'm looking for certain themes and certain things. You know, I would say that for most people, humor, you know, is very effective. But what the advertisers often use is a kind of shock value. They try to shock us. And that is just to get our attention, to break through the clutter, because we're exposed to so many ads that if they can get our attention, even if it's negative, they've still gotten our attention.
Yeah, I think a shocking image definitely stays with you.
Right, even a
much
violent
longer.
image. You know, we might recoil from it, but we remember it, we're drawn to it. And advertising really is primarily subliminal, and by that I don't mean sort of words hidden in ice cubes. I mean that it's primarily unconscious. The real impact of it is unconscious.
Well, we're going to look at another segment shortly from your video where you do discuss violent images in advertising. Before that, what did you think about the kids' reactions to some of the ads that?
First of all, I thought they were great. I mean, I thought they were a very smart, lively group of kids, and that they made some very, you know, wise comments and smart comments about those ads, and so I was impressed by that. You know, and also by the fact that they, you know, freely admitted that they look for brand names and that they are, you know, they are influenced to some extent. And even the boy at the end who said he wasn't, you know, came around to saying, well, I guess maybe I am. And that takes, you know, that's unusual, especially for young people to admit to being influenced by anything.
That's very true. Let's see. Maybe before we go to the table of time to look at just one more set of ads. And I think this would provide a nice segue into the section you talk about, the violent imagery. But if we first look at some clothing ads, again, this one from a men's magazine.
Well,
I'll let you.
A little phallic symbol there. And also, again, I often talk about the men's poses being, you know, powerful, strong, independent, you know, individual. You see his face. You know, often with women, their face is cut off, that it's just the body or the torso. But here you see his face. He's a unique individual, you know, and he's, you know, carrying a big stick.
Yeah, very outdoorsy, very active imagery. And then when I compared, when you look at something like this two-page spread in a women's magazine.
This is really
for
horrifying.
clothing.
I mean, this is so. It just her face. First of all, she looks like she's got a black eye. The glistening skin. The way is she in a car? Is that?
It looks like a car, and actually the kids didn't really want to look at this.
I'm not surprised. I mean,
it's kind of
disgusting. It could easily be sort of a rape scene. It's a very unsettling image, particularly because of the pose is horrible, but the expression on her face is pretty awful, and her, you know, she looks like she's being caught unawares. It looks like her clothes have been pulled up. It's a very unsettling image, I think.
It's quite disturbing. And then I think on the other side, again comparing with a men's magazine clothing ad, where
serious, you know,
Very
probably
professional.
discussing, you know, world politics, very professional, you know, very not, you know, they're all extraordinarily good looking, you know, in a if you like that type, but it's a very different, extraordinarily different from an image like this.
Yeah, I think
They're powerful. She's totally powerless.
that's it, exactly. I mean, the poses, as you show in a lot of the ads and in the video segment that we're going to watch, the men's poses are very unthreatened, whereas...
They're in charge. Yeah.
Exactly.
And she certainly isn't.
Right. Well, maybe we could take a look at that segment now from Jean's video.
20 years ago, I spoke about the increasing violence against women in advertising, ranging from what I called the romantic stranger. And these ads featured a woman outdoors alone with a shadowy figure lurking in the background, and always the idea was that a romance was about to take place. Here the copy says, "Let the adventure begin." Now, I'm sure I speak for all women here when I say that when I'm outdoors alone and there's a shadowy figure lurking in the background, romance is the last thing on my mind. And what this does, of course, is it trivializes the very serious issue of violence against women, something that is truly epidemic in our society. It not only trivializes that violence, it eroticizes it. Wear it out and make it scream. Now, this could be a seduction, but it could as easily be an attack, and it's certainly unnerving when we can't tell the difference. Often, violence, hostility, dominance is presented as erotic, as attractive, as appealing in ads and throughout the culture. Push my buttons, I'm looking for a man who can totally floor me, who won't stop till the top, you must live in sin. And think about it, this woman is extremely passive, vulnerable, she's in an elevator, we all know that elevators are dangerous places for women, and yet she's asking for it. And there seems to be more of this than ever before, more ads that imply that women want to be forced to have sex. An ad for a perfume called Fetish, and the copy says, "Apply generously to your neck so he can smell the scent as you shake your head no." Making it very clear that we don't mean it when we say no, that she's, again, asking for it. There continue to be lots of ads that normalize and trivialize battering. And battering is the single greatest cause of injury to women in America. I ended the original version of Killing Us Softly with a slide of a horrifying display in a store window. It says, "We'd kill for these." There's a female corpse in a shroud in a garbage can with blood on her face and a shoe across her throat. But today we still have images of brutality. Murdered women are sometimes joked about in ads. Imagine an ad like this with a woman being shot. Trivializing copy like this, "Great hair never dies." Or imagine an ad like this targeting our young people. In so many ways, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Some of the original ads that I used years ago seem impossibly sexist and even quite hilarious these days. "My boyfriend told me he loved me for my mind. I was never so insulted in my life." "She's built like all our products, heavy where she has to take the strain." And yet, consider these current ads. A woman being used as a footrest to sell skateboards. It doesn't argue, it won't talk back, and it has no opinion. The perfect companion. One thing that has changed dramatically in recent years has been the increase in ads that objectify men. However, this doesn't happen nearly to the extent that it does with women. And it's often misinterpreted as a kind of equality, whereas the truth is that there are no consequences for men as a result of being objectified. Men don't live in a world in which they are likely to be raped, harassed, or beaten, or at least straight men don't live in such a world, whereas women do. A much more serious problem for men is that masculinity is so often linked with violence, with brutality, with ruthlessness. Boys grow up in a culture in which men are constantly shown as perpetrators of violence. And talking, communicating, is so often seen in our culture as a weakness in men. Do you want to be the one she tells her deep, dark secret to, or do you want to be her deep, dark secret? Well, there's no question, of course, but that men should aspire to be the deep, dark secret. In general, human qualities are divided up.
Welcome back. And that gives us a lot to discuss. First of all, I was curious about the slide you showed from the shoe store with that terrible display.
That was a long time ago, but it was a shoe store. It was a shoe store in Harvard Square, actually.
In Harvard Square?
In Harvard Square. And it was, they stopped it as a result of protests. There was quite a lot of protests. But of course, it should be unthinkable to put an image like, something like that, a murdered woman in a store window to sell shoes.
I would think so. And following that, you show a lot of advertisements that do objectify women and draw a link between that type of objectification and, sort of resulting, I mean, not directly resulting, but eventually resulting violence against women. I wonder if you could explain that connection.
I think when you turn a human being into an object, you're really inviting violence. That it's very difficult to be violent to someone we consider an equal human being, but it's very easy to abuse a thing. So whenever a person becomes a thing, an object, I think violence becomes inevitable. We see this with racism, we see it with homophobia, we see it in wartime. The soldiers in wartime are encouraged to objectify the enemy. Because if you don't do that, it's really impossible to kill them. You have to think of them as gooks or as, Jerrys or Japs or whatever. You have to do that. And that happens to women all the time. The kind of constant objectification of women, I think, sets us up for violence. It's not a direct thing, but that it's part of a cultural climate in which women are seen as things. And so the violence, the abuse, is partly the chilling but logical result of this kind of objectification.
Yeah, unfortunately, it is almost rational, to see the link between the two. I would ask you also to, if you don't mind, explaining a little bit more about your ideas about masculinity and how you said in the video that it is linked to violence and brutality.
Well, the stereotype is, real masculinity isn't, of course, but that the stereotype in the culture is that often that men are the perpetrators of violence, that men are brutal, that men are ruthless, this sort of thing. And I think that this stereotype does enormous harm, of course, to boys and to men. And that boys grow up feeling that it's dangerous to be vulnerable, it's dangerous to express feelings, to have anything that might be considered a feminine side. And what this is really about is real contempt for the feminine. It isn't just contempt for women, but it's contempt for all things considered feminine. And boys get the message early on that there just can't be anything in them that is the least bit feminine. And tragically, what that means is that then they have to repress qualities and feelings such as nurturance and compassion and sensitivity and intuition and all of these human qualities that we tend to label feminine in our culture.
Wow. It seems like it's probably more difficult to ask advertisers to change the subtle messages that they show in their ads. What do you have suggestions about how this?
Well, first of all, you're right. It's not going to come from the advertisers. But one thing we need to do is teach media literacy in our schools. We need to be teaching kids starting in kindergarten to be critical viewers so that they will understand, not just to be able to deconstruct the ads, but although that's important, but to understand the incredible amount of money and research that goes into creating these ads, and also to understand how important advertising is, that far from being trivial, it is the engine that drives the media. The primary purpose of the mass media is to deliver audiences to advertisers. Everything else is secondary. But a media literate person understands that. But if you haven't been educated, then how could you know?
So would you suggest starting these types of classes as early as
kindergarten?
Kindergarten.
I mean, I think that the United States is one of the few developed nations in the world that doesn't teach media literacy in the schools, and arguably we need it the most. So that would be one thing to do. I think there are other things we can do too. There are things we can do to some extent control and restrict the amount of advertising that we're surrounded by. The European Union is debating the possibility of a complete ban on advertising targeting children.
Oh, really?
Which would be phenomenal. I mean, if we could, it would be a long way before we can ever do that in this country because the advertisers are so powerful. But what a wonderful idea to sort of say you cannot target children, because children are much too vulnerable to these messages, and the research is pretty clear that they have harmful effects on children in all kinds of ways.
Are these advertisements for products that children normally would use or would not use?
Well, I think that it would be any advertising that deliberately targets children. Now, some of it would be things like the junk food and the soft drinks and the games and toys, but it would also mean things like the alcohol ads that are aimed at children, the tobacco ads that are aimed at children. Obviously, we shouldn't be allowing these industries to target our children.
Interesting point. Well, I don't think we have time before the next tape to look at any other ads. We'll do that after. The next segment, though, is actually from a video called Tough Guys, which was produced by another media critic named Jackson Katz. And it's a follow-up to the segment in Jean's video about the increasing violence in advertising against women, although Jackson Katz looks at it from more of a film and TV and pop culture perspective. So why don't we take a look at that tape now?
Another aspect of violent masculinity and violence that kids are subject to on a daily basis, really, is the really popular genre of film, the slasher film. And one of the things that happens in slasher films, typically, is the violence is not just violent, it's also sexualized violence. So you often have scenes, for example, of girls undressing or taking a shower or wearing sexy low-cut dresses, sometimes even removing clothing at opportune moments, or being positioned in sexually provocative camera angles, deliberately designed to sexually arouse straight boys, and then at the moment the boys are aroused is when the girls are assaulted. So the sexualization of violence might be one of the reasons, one of the areas we need to look at when we talk about why are so many boys and men sexually assaulting girls and women. Because the rates of rape and sexual abuse and sexual assault perpetrated by men against girls and women, as well as against boys, are just out of sight in our society. And even though crime rates in general have been coming down in recent years, the rape rate hasn't, the sexual abuse rate hasn't. We have to ask ourselves, why not? This normalization of sexual violence is the essence, for example, of a lot of pornography, which plays a really important role in male culture. Most of the critical discussion about pornography focuses rightly on the objectification and degradation of women. But because the massive pornography industry is overwhelmingly controlled by men, and the vast majority of consumers are men, we should also look at it for what it tells us about masculinity. And if we did, we'd see that the flip side of submissive femininity is a masculinity that is defined by power, control, dominance, and sometimes violence. Another popular performer who's tapped into the same kind of anger against women and misogyny is Howard Stern. Stern is often portrayed in the popular discourse as this bad boy who's challenging traditional morality and transgressing against authority. But that's such a superficial reading of what he's doing. What Stern actually does is simply reinforce, in crude fashion, some of the most tired, old-fashioned sexist values.
You wearing panties, say? Pull your pants off. What about your bra? Is that coming off?
The bra's got to come off.
You got to take that off.
Look, all right, ladies, are you ready to disrobe? All right, take off your shirts.
Let me see. Face me. They're not horrible, but I think they should be bigger. You have hair on your ass? You girls go to the gym and work out a little bit.
What Stern does is he creates a world for his largely young male audience, a world in which they can feel good about themselves by putting down and sexually degrading women. The gender world might be changing all around them, but on the Howard Stern show, women are bimbos to be stared at and exploited. That is anything but transgressive. Howard Stern is no anti-authority rebel. His shtick absolutely reinforces traditional sexism.
Say a 6, 9, 8, 10.
You're like a horse. You're like a fine horse.
A clear indication of how the supposedly lovable Howard embodies contempt for women is in his reaction to the tragic shootings at Columbine High School. When the news first broke about the horrific massacre being perpetrated by Harris and Klebold, the people that Stern identified with were not the boys and girls running for their lives out of the school, but with the male shooters and what he would have done if he was them. On his radio show, he said, and these are his very words, quote, "There were some really good-looking girls running out with their hands over their heads. Did those kids try to have sex with any of the good-looking girls? They didn't even do that. At least if you're gonna kill yourself and kill all the kids, why wouldn't you have some sex? If I was going to kill some people, I'd take them out with sex. Unquote. So Howard Stern took the Littleton tragedy as an opportunity to make a rape joke. What a rebel. One very serious consequence of teaching boys and men that masculinity is about power and control is the increasingly common phenomenon of teen dating violence. There's been a disturbing trend over the past decade where high school-age boys have been acting out in controlling and abusive ways in relationships with their...
Hello again. And following up that good example of objectification of women, I wonder if you did mention in one of the segments of your video that we showed how recently objectification of men has become a little bit more apparent in advertising. And how do you see that? In what way?
Well, there certainly is more of it than ever before. Calvin Klein really was sort of the beginner of that. And it's complicated because advertisers have to be very careful, although in some ways they are appealing to a gay audience. They can't take they can't run the risk of having their product associated, because there's so much homophobia. So they have to be very careful. But in fact, a lot of the images of men that used to be only in gay publications are now out in the mainstream. Yeah. But I don't think that this objectification of men has very serious consequences for men. Probably for boys and young men, some of them are led to take steroids, to try and bulk up and look bigger and that sort of thing. But in general, as I say in the film, men aren't at risk of being raped or harassed or beaten, or certainly straight white men aren't at that risk, whereas women are. So when men are objectified, men are presented as more powerful, bigger, stronger. When women are objectified, we're presented as less powerful, more fragile. And when women are objectified, there's always risk. There's always the threat of sexual violence, whereas that just simply isn't the case for men.
Right, that makes sense. In terms of that, just one other pair of ads that I pulled. This first one, obviously for cologne from a men's magazine. The imagery in this ad seems almost, familial.
Oh yeah, very much so, yeah. And it's sweet, and again, they're individuals, these men, it's three generations, they have some sort of connection, they're all, they're individuals, they're not sort of just objects, so it's very different from the ways in which women are usually portrayed.
Exactly, which was my next point, this perfume ad from a women's magazine. In terms of sexual violence, I don't know, when you look at this...
Yeah, it normalizes rape, basically. I mean, you can't tell the difference, really, whether this is a seduction or whether it's an attack. And certainly, when you can't tell the difference, that's unnerving. And it really is very much what Jackson was talking about, what I've been talking about for a long time, the way this normalizes certain kinds of sexualized violence or quasi-violence. And even if it weren't that, it's an incredibly graphic image to have in a mainstream magazine.
Yes.
And that we're all of us so surrounded by images that used to belong to the world of pornography that are now just out there. Now when you talk about this, sometimes people can think you're sounding prudish or something, but it's far from that, really. It's really, it's a very trivializing, pornographic approach to sex. It doesn't have anything to do with real sexuality, and it certainly doesn't have anything to do with relationships.
Yeah, excellent point. Perhaps to finish up, we'll just move away from the actual violent images. I thought that these groups of ads were rather interesting. They are all alcohol ads, but one group is from a men's magazine, the other is from a women's magazine. The stand, unfortunately, is not large enough to hold all of them, but if you go through some of the images, each of these...
These are from the men's magazine.
These are from the men's magazine, and I definitely saw a pattern to all of them.
There's a very blatant ad, isn't it? Be at least capable of bad.
For me, the pattern being that all of the images were of women.
Right.
For the ads in the men's magazines.
Just women by themselves. And, yeah.
Just women, no couples.
Or here the kind of great lesbian fantasy of pornography. You know, the two beautiful women who are, you know, together, but they're really just waiting for, you know, for the man to come along.
And contrast that with the majority of alcohol ads from the women's magazine, something like this, a 2-page spread. This one, where you don't see the couple, but you know that there is a couple in bed.
Right.
And this one, again, showing a couple rather than just an individual person.
Alcohol advertisers target men and women very differently, you know, and for men are offered sex with alcohol. You know, they're offered the old cliche about getting a woman drunk and then you can have your way with her and that sort of thing. So there's the woman is therefore alone and she's very sexy in the men's magazines. It's sort of like you buy the drink, you get the girl. Whereas for women, it's much more about romance, and it's much more about being in a relationship. I mean, it's a sexual relationship, but it's a relationship. It isn't just the idea of sort of impersonal kind of sex.
Right.
So it's very different.
It is extremely different.
And also the alcohol advertisers have to be very careful because there's they want women to drink very heavily, but women who drink very heavily get very bad reputations, and particularly they get reputations for being promiscuous, although that actually isn't the truth. But so they have to draw a fine line. You know, they have to say to the woman, yes, you'll have sex, but you can still be a good girl. You know, it'll be within the context of a relationship.
Wow, it's very ironic.
Yes, yeah.
Well, I'm afraid the time just slipped away from us.
Yes, yeah.
But thank you very much for coming in. You can find out more about Jean's videos on her website, and I think that we have that address that we can show to you.
And also my book, which is called Can't Buy My Love, How Advertising Changes the Way We Think and Feel, and which is about alcohol advertising, tobacco advertising, violence in advertising, all of the things we've been talking about.
Okay. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, Rachel. My pleasure.
And we'll see you in 2 weeks. Good night.